you have such a relatively small brain area. It has this very rich representation that can really help you to make sense of what is driving the other people, which is in the end what theory of mind is about, is trying to predict what the other one is might be doing based on their current knowledge.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Neuroscience and Beyond podcast. I'm your host Villain, and together with my amazing team of graduate students, we're on a mission to make science, especially neuroscience, more accessible and exciting for everyone. Today, we're joined by Dr. Raymundo Báez-Mendoza, a neuroscientist who studies how our brains navigate the rich and complex world of social behavior. From game theory and decision-making to brain recordings in non-human primates and humans, Dr. Báez-Mendoza takes us on a journey through the neural circuits of cooperation, trust, and even friendship. We will dive into the fascinating world of social identity cells, explore how memory shapes behavior, and learn how neuroscience is beginning to decode the brain's ability to model other minds. So whether you're fascinated by social behavior, curious about brain-machine interfaces, or simply love learning how science can decode human connection, this episode has something for you. If you enjoy the podcast, be sure to subscribe and leave us a comment below. We always love hearing from you. And now, dear listeners, please enjoy the conversation with Dr. Raymundo Báez-Mendoza. Dr. Báez-Mendoza, nice to meet you, and thank you for coming to our podcast.
Well, thanks a lot for the invitation. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
I also look forward to our conversation. I'm sure it's going to be awesome, given the fact that you're studying social interaction, not only in non-human primates, but also in human. And your career is so far stellar. You have been in awesome institutes around the world, in the States, in Germany, in the UK, and your research is truly fascinating. Let me start by asking, what is actually the focus of your research?
Thanks a lot for those very kind words. It's very kind. The focus of my work, and I guess, I'll just kind of go way back so that it makes a bit more sense and just not, be very dry about the focus of my current research. So we're interested in the neural basis of social interactions. What does that mean? It means, how does the brain make sense of how we interact? And for that, we use both, as you were mentioning, both humans and non-human primates, so monkeys. And I can also say we do have some work also with rodents, so no species is excluded here. Mm-hmm. And something that drove me towards, I was reflecting about this, how that came about. And there's this arc of different things that happen in my life, like they just accumulate. It's not like a single thing, but it's like things that come up little by little. And so one of the first things, and we can talk a little bit about my personal life, is that so I grew up in Mexico City. I was as a kid, I was fascinated with playing football or soccer. For if somebody's from the US listening to this and don't know what football is, and so I truly wanted to be a professional football player. And I wasn't that bad, and I had a lot of drive to do this. And I made it to the academy of a football team, like a professional football team.
Which football team was that?
Pumas.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was there. So, blood, sweat, and tears. And I was there for a year, but it was really clear that was not that good. It was, and the thing that happened is that, I had built up all this identity about being a football player, and my relationships were about with the other football players. And then I finished. I was like, I'm done with the football. And then I ended up without having this kind of normal relationships that I had with other people. So there I realized that I started to open up to other friends, and made friends outside of football, if you want to call it like that way. And looking back, that's kind of the trigger point for me to realize, social interactions are super important to live a full life, if I can say so. Yeah,
that is truly fascinating, not only because you played football, but because you realized through the sport kind of something, you were inspired by sport to do science, which is actually quite unusual. I mean, it's very interesting. I must mention that I also played football for quite a long time, and I made it to the second squad of our first team. But at the end, I'm from Bulgaria, and football there is really on a low level. So I decided to stop at some point when I was 18, 19, and then start studying. So indeed, my best friends are still from football. I also made other friends, as you did, but football was something that really gave me a lot in my life, and I'm very, very happy that I could do that for, 10 years or something like that. It was awesome. Yes, I forgot to say that you studied in one of the biggest universities in Mexico, right? Before coming to Europe. How do you think, by the way, could you maybe make some brief comparison regarding working ethic of people in America? You've been to Harvard, in this university in Mexico, then Cambridge, Tübingen, now in Göttingen. Is there anything like different in this, let's say, Europe and America? Or when you're in kind of like excellent institution, people have this drive, motivation, and they more or less work the same?
That's it is an interesting point, because it's something I've also thought about, and so I would say I was there at different stages in my career. So for example, in Mexico I was there as an undergrad, and yes, it's huge. I think it's something at the time it was something like 250,000 students at the university. It has different campuses and whatnot, but it's a lot of people. So there, you can study, and you can pass and graduate and everything. But if you want to really push yourself, you have to do it on your own. And that's also kind of interesting, because that's where a lot of my interest for social interactions like more formally developed, and also where my interest in the animal model, which is working with monkeys as a way to understand human brain function, started. So during that, when I was an undergrad, we had the opportunity to also develop our own seminars, for example, together with some friends that were also super motivated to learn more about neuroscience. So we would get together, and we organized like a student-led seminar, classics on neuroscience it was called. And we, like, every week or almost every other week, we would sit down and read classic papers in neuroscience. Like we would read Ricardo Miledi's papers, or try to read some more advanced biophysics and so on. So, but that kind of experience led us to like everybody in that group is actually kind of still in academia in one way or another. So we had this very motivating experience to do this together. And that also, having that group also led me to the opportunity to be exposed to different perspectives. So we had a very enriching lecture about behavioral ecology, and that opened me to the possibility, to understand a different way of thinking than just a psychologist. So that was really nice to kind of open up the possibility to do different ways of doing science. And so that's a kind of what how things started in Mexico. And then, like, if I were to compare Tübingen, I mean, it was Tübingen, Cambridge, and Harvard. It's a little bit, how can I say it? Like, it's people were already very motivated. You already have a very high rate of selection. You decide to keep going, to keep studying, and you're already selected. You if you go to any of these places, you're already being selected from a bunch of people. So people are usually quite driven and motivated, and they are scarily smart, which is something that it's something that's really fascinating. Like you meet this incredibly smart people and at all of these places. Like it is humbling and sometimes scary to come across as like very dumb or not smart enough. But after a while, you kind of realize, okay, this is they know more than me, and I'm just here to learn more, and that kind of drives that curiosity, that drive to keep learning more about whatever you're interested in, which is in my case social interactions and how the brain makes sense out of them.
Let's go into the social interaction right now. Before we start, you also study abnormal social interaction, right? Am I right? Or this is old already?
It's not quite old. I wouldn't say I'm not really focusing on abnormal social behavior.
Okay, then we will leave it out and we focus on social interaction. What kind of social interaction do you focus on?
Right. So one type of social interactions, or one framework to study social interactions that I've been very inspired on, is game theory. So the idea that you can capture social interactions. Let me just backtrack there. So the driver for social interactions are incentives. So people are driven by incentives, and one way to capture them is through game theory. So a way to formalize what is driving people's choices. So they're driven by incentives. So using that type of so with game theory, you have different games or tasks or behavioral interactions, kind of scripted behavioral interactions. And with these scripted behavioral interactions, then you can ask questions about why do people would prefer to cooperate versus defect, or they would prefer to coordinate, and so on. So it's sort of a very basic framework that I'm working on, having this scripted behavioral task. And within this scripted behavioral tasks or behavioral interactions, then we can really have a better grasp of the different components that form a social interaction.
So do you also study risk behavior, risk aversive behavior, also reward in this context?
Yeah, exactly. So reward would be very. I would say it's the foundational approach. From my perspective, you have this. Behavior is motivated. It's an incentive. So that's kind of the starting point. And risky behavior and risk in general, it's kind of a really difficult word because it has this two meanings. So on one side you have the more common sense, like, oh, it's risky to drive a car super fast because there's a high probability that you will have a crash. While we usually now in kind of borrowing more from the finance literature, we use risk in terms of uncertainty about an outcome. So in this case, a truly very risky situation would be a flip of a coin because you don't know which side is gonna fall. So in terms of social interactions, like that's where kind of this truly social interaction arises when because you don't know what the other person might be doing in response or in the context that you are in. For example, right now, I don't know what you're gonna ask me next, and so there's some uncertainty about that, but yeah, or there's a high risk of what's gonna happen. So that's something that our brains are trying to solve or consistently, so to form how can I say this, a representation of our environment, a representation of our world.
Everything that you described is very interesting, but I can imagine that humans are doing these interactions, in the lab, for example. How do you approach this problem when you study non-human primates, for example?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's actually the real advantage of having these structured tasks, is that you can teach monkeys to behave in a certain way that they will indicate what their preferences are. For example, they prefer apple juice over grape juice, or they would prefer different types of juices or mint or tea, and you just teach them to make these decisions, and then you have to teach them also to make decisions that are contingent or dependent, or that basically that their choices depend on what the other animal is also choosing. And that's where it gets really difficult, because you can't get into their mind. They can tell you what they're really thinking. Are they aware of that the other one is making a choice? So we have to make these tricks where the animals interact either with screens, or, for example, now there's a very, very cool new way of doing this type of experiments where the animals can see each other through a screen, and they make their choices in this transparent screen, like a little bit like Star Trek. So that's really cool. But now, and then something that we also did was to make, instead of using computer monitors, we used an apparatus. So in this case, it's something physical that the animals are manipulating, and they can see that the other one is manipulating. So this contingency, this relationship between action and an outcome is a little bit more obvious, at least for us, and I really hope that for them as well. They behave as if they actually understand these relationships when they interact with others.
And studying non-human primates gives you also opportunity to invasively study also the brain, right? Do you do this in your lab?
Yeah. So we I've been just talking a little bit about this arc, and I really got into the idea of studying primates based on the pioneering work from Raymundo Romo, who studied decision-making processes in primates. And then it was such an accident. So I knew about his work. And then I went to a conference, and I got, this is way back, and I got two books. I got a book and a magazine. I got a Scientific American and a book called Neuroeconomics by Paul Kunter. And there he described all these fascinating experiments that he had done using non-human primates, monkeys, to study decision-making and how to distinguish decision-making in different contexts. And so basically and then the Scientific American, I mean, this was such a coincidence. Like, they had this description of experiments by Nikos Logothetis, who I ended up working for during my master's, where he described these experiments using binocular disparate rivalry. So these are experiments where you test conscious perception of different objects. And at the same time, he was able to measure brain activity. I thought, wow, this is amazing. Like, you can really look and hear and try to understand the brain in action, and that's something that it is truly beautiful to experience. Like you see the animals, they're taking actions, they're taking turns to make so we had trained these animals to make these choices, and these choices resulted in small sips of juice for each other. And at the same time, we could hear the kind of a crackling noise in the loudspeaker of our apparatus, and this was the brain in action. Mm-hmm. So we use this very tiny wires that are like thinner than a hair, and we insert them very carefully into the brain, and this doesn't cause any pain to the animal when we do this. And they basically work as microphones, just like I'm talking to you. So right now I'm only a single person talking to a microphone, but these microphones are basically listening to a stadium of people talking. Mm-hmm. And you have to put very, 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 very close to a single person to be able to hear this conversation that it might be having with somebody else, but you don't know who it is. Mm-hmm. You just kind of have to make guesses. Mm-hmm. And it's still a challenge. It's a technological challenge, but this kind of basic principle of listening in on the brain it's truly beautiful. And that's something that really got me hooked into this idea of doing this, using this type of technology to listen in on the brain while the animals are making these decisions.
Just to clarify, when you say listening of the brain on the brain, this means that the spike that the neurons produce, and you hear it whatever sound it is, and then you can hear it. And of course you have the traces, and then you can eventually backtrack neuronal activity in certain region, or some even relays. I don't know how exactly it works, but I assume this is the case. What brain regions are important when we talk about social interaction?
That's a really tricky question in a way, because if I say, for example, from my perspective, from my experience, you can kind of split them into three different main. Let me backtrack there a little bit. I would say what brain regions are important depends on what the brain, what the functions are. So when we're talking about social interactions, you have to think about three things. So one is motivation. What are the incentives? You also need to think about what are the other players. So perception, you have to think about perception, and you also need to include a certain degree of social cognition. So basically thinking in the space of other social beings being there. And these are networks of brain areas. I would say, for example, it's very clear that for reward and for incentive, for that we have the reward system. So you have the dopaminergic system, you have the striatum, you have the orbitofrontal cortex, the anterior cingulate cortex. I really hope I mentioned the amygdala. Otherwise, my colors is gonna kill me. Sorry, I also forgot to mention emotion regulation. But for emotion regulation, you definitely have you have the amygdala. You have this very strong connection with the anterior cingulate cortex. And thinking about social cognition, you have the medial prefrontal cortex that plays a big role in during this social interactions. You also have the orbitofrontal cortex, and probably also the anterior insula that plays a big role in this. And thinking about social perception, of course, you have the ventral stream in the temporal lobe. So you have a huge array of brain regions and brain areas that play a role during social interactions. I really can't say one is more important than the other. but there's definitely clues of their roles during different functions.
And of course, within these brain regions, you have certain neuronal population that are doing some job, some others are doing other job, and the things are even more complicated than they sound. It's not that easy. Correct me if I'm wrong. At some point, you studied neurobasis of friendship. Am I right? Or you're studying it right now? I don't know. What is currently going on.
That's kind of our goal.
Yeah.
So the current goal for lab, and kind of the lofty goal, if I may say so, is to study the neural basis of friendships. And the reason why I wanted to for us to focus on friendships is that friendships are kind of the backbone of society. So if you understand how people interact and what are these proximal mechanisms in the brain that facilitate or drive the maintenance and the kind of the formation and the maintenance of social ties, I think then you can really get a better understanding of what's of maintaining friendships, which are so important for our well-being. That being said, we're not quite there in terms of getting any new results. Yes.
But what is your intention now? What kind of neurons would you poke, to get information from, for example?
I gave you a very long list now of brain areas that sound really interesting to me. So definitely I have some experience now trying to understand the medial prefrontal cortex. That's an area where I would really, I'm thinking it's going to be really interesting to look at, because it has this property of, so there's a certain, so we found out that there's a certain population in that brain area that can make the connection between what the other ones are doing, and we're not talking about just not between differentiating between myself and not myself, but differentiating between me, you, and someone else, and what the other one is exactly doing. And that's something that it is fundamental when you're trying to differentiate between people, between a population. This is this person, and this person is being nice to me, or this person is not being nice to me, and that's a property of that brain area. I think the amygdala is also a very good candidate to dig deeper and try to understand how does the amygdala participate in friendship formation. I mean, there's this very interesting, this is again one of those things that's so interesting. They discovered that people that have damage in the amygdala, they have a different perception of social space. So if people that have bilateral damage in the amygdala, they would they don't mind that people get super close to you. So right now we're at the I would say normal distance. We're sitting at a table. People with the bilateral damage to the amygdala, they wouldn't mind that they're nose to nose basically, and that becomes aversive. It would be aversive for me. I don't know about you.
Yeah, that is interesting. But if we stay on this idea, what about the cultural differences, right? You're from Mexico. I assume you guys are more like warm, welcome, touching each other more, at least the southern nation, like Italians, Spaniards. We're also like this kind of, we like to be close to our friends. Whereas here in the north and Germany, Scandinavia, people are a little bit more distant, more cold. Do you think there is something in the amygdala that is different in these two kind of, let's say, groups of people?
I think that's something we have to dig deeper into, for sure. I think that going from that hypothesis, I would definitely expect to find that, but I don't know the literature that well to be able to tell you.
Yeah.
But that makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah.
Future question.
Yeah.
If you run out of ideas.
Yeah, but I mean, like if you can even think about it in terms of individual differences, it doesn't need to be cultural thing, right?
For sure. That's absolutely true. Interesting that you mentioned amygdala when you talk about friendship, because for most of the people, amygdala is associated with fear, right? Why is that you have fear and friendship in the same time, in the same spot process? Do you think there is any reason for that?
That's a really interesting question, because it is something that, when I was studying that it was amygdala fear conditioning, because that's how we learn or how we start to study the amygdala and the amygdala function. We have this beautiful mapped out circuit of how fear conditioning, which is the idea that with fear conditioning, you learn to associate a certain event with a very unpleasant event, like something that scares you, like a very loud noise or maybe a very mild electric shock. But you learn that association, and the amygdala plays a big role in that. So there's like there's always been that very big association. But the key here is that the amygdala is really good at responding to events that drive your attention. And that's fearful stimuli, like big lights or electric shock, or something really scary like a snake. Oh my god, snakes are so scary. But also appetitive things, things that we love, things that we really enjoy consuming. So you would have, there's also a response to seeing a beautiful plate of food. I was gonna say tacos. Beautiful plate of tacos. Oh my god, that was so good. And there's this association where you see the plate and you have this experience. You have this memory of experiencing tacos. So the amygdala is super good at making this connection. So also for fear, but also for appetitive. So, and we and many people have shown that it plays this role on representing this association in both appetitive and aversive environments. So that's why there's this very big emphasis that it can play a role on friendships as well, because friendships can be a source of appetitive and aversive stimuli. So yeah,
very interesting and well put kind of conclusion or summary of the role, and kind of maybe there are different roles of course besides this in amygdala, but these are two quite important, I think. You mentioned memory. I was always thinking when looking at papers or reading literature related to decision making, motivation, and social interaction, for example, we are studying some brain regions, right, which might be important, etc. But if you think about the underlying thing is memory, you need to know what interaction is, first of all, who is in front of you, etc. All this information has to be put down, even about your prior choices, your prior experiences, and then you have to make the decision. Do we have any clue how this tons of information is integrated so that there is this output in the prefrontal cortex, for example, or amygdala striatum, wherever?
That's a tricky one. That's a really tricky one. So you mentioned memory, and my first reaction was like, so it does play a big role in social interactions in general. There's no way around that. So one fascinating fact, I wouldn't say fact, but one fascinating aspect of memory and social memory is that there's appears to be almost dedicated area in the hippocampus, the CA2, that is dedicated to memory of social events, memories of other individuals. And that certainly points out to the primacy of social events and social interactions, and how does that information is retrieved and then used for taking these decisions is not super clear. Mm-hmm. So what we found so far is that at least we know we humans we have this capacity to drive our decisions based on our previous interactions, but we also now have some evidence that monkeys are also driven by their previous interactions with specific other individuals. So they would hold in these memories of how they interacted with others, how, I'm just gonna say with the air quotes kind, because we don't know if they're kind or not, but just basically if they received a reward or not from others and from specific others, and how does that drive their decision to reciprocate. And this decision to reciprocate is based on past history. So there's this indication that it does play a role, and that the medial prefrontal cortex is able to take information from previous experiences and predict or we can use that information in the neural activity, in this spike in activity in the brain, to predict what the recorded animal is going to do, if they're going to be reciprocating or not, based on the history of past interactions. Mm-hmm. So we suspect that it's the output of a network, mm-hmm. and probably the CA2 plays a big role, but I am also certain that other brain areas also play a big role. So that's where a little bit the limit of recording from a single brain area lies, because we don't know how well the network is really driving these behaviors.
Mm-hmm. We still have a lot to discover in terms of network, right? I mean, I had this discussion last time with our previous guest that we know a lot about molecules, cells. We know a lot about cognition and the big picture, but the in between, the network is still kind of missing. And now we develop tools that allow us actually to study also this missing piece. But of course, it's extremely hard and challenging. And probably in the next, decade or so, we can have quite a lot of more information. When you mention monkeys in this kind of setup, this is a little bit different, but can we talk about theory of mind, for example? Do they have this kind of capacity? What is first theory of mind? Let's put it that way. And then do we know the underlying neuromechanisms of this behavior, theory of mind? Yeah.
So I would say, just kind of going back a little bit to the previous, your comment, I think if we set up the right behavioral tools or the right neuronal tools, then we can contribute, we can collaborate and contribute and result and produce a better understanding of this. So that's where it's really nice and really beautiful to be able to talk to people that know more than you do about all these different technologies and how to implement them and so on. And in our hands, it's more about producing these new tools to understand behavior. And going back to this question, and then that's where, for talking about theory of mind, that's a super challenging question, because theory of mind, the way I think about theory of mind is that it is this capacity to create model of what the other person might be thinking, and what might be not only what the other might be not thinking or believing. And that's, of course, that theory is gonna be, you have to somehow test it, right? It's something that exists in your mind, and there's no easy way to express it but just by verbalizing. So the challenge then becomes, how can we test if non-verbal animal is capable of or showing theory of mind? And for that, there's a lot of studies, especially done by primatologists, testing theory of mind like behaviors, where you use this false belief task. And that's something where you basically have a situation where you create a situation where you have two characters, and one of the characters let me just tell you the story. It's about Sally Ann. Sally and Ann are friends, and you're watching Sally and Ann. And Sally has, let's just say a bag of cookies. I love cookies. And so Sally kind of hides them in the cookie jar. And she goes out of the scene. She goes to, visit a friend. Then Anne, in the meantime, takes out the cookies and kind of eats them all. And then she just leaves. And then she puts back the cookie jar, covers it. And then Sally comes back, and you ask where would Sally look for the cookies?
Do you ask me?
Yeah. Where does Sally would look for the cookies?
Probably she would think, oh, somebody took the cookies, right?
Well, yeah. Once she opens the cookie jar, right?
Yeah.
So she would look for the cookies in the cookie jar. So that's a very I won't say it was not the best explanation, but let's just go with it, of the false belief task. And in this task, you have different adaptations for primates. This has been tested with chimpanzees, for example, and other animals. And people have also tried this with rhesus, which is kind of the favorite animal model to do neuroscience. And with some success, they have tested this, showing that animals would show a certain looking preference. So you would look not only at what the animals are selecting, so they can't really select things, but they can look at things. So if I expect you to move towards the jar, we'll look at the jar first instead of the glass, that sort of thing. So there's some indication that that's the case, but it's something that it's not trivial to, and it's apparently very hard to do. But yeah.
What if, I might talk complete nonsense, but let's see. What if you design, I don't know if it's possible to design some kind of mental game for humans, for example, put them in the MRI, check for theory of mind, and backtrack circuits, and then eventually record from monkeys during this kind of setup of game theory or social interaction setup. Could this be possible to backtrack some kind of theory of mind, neurons, for example?
That's an interesting idea. The tricky part is that maybe what the animals are looking at is not what human might look at. That's something that we, and then it's not so easy to infer what the animal is really thinking. So that's where I think it becomes this challenge that we'll be trying to, or I think that the field will try to sort out sooner than later.
Yeah, I guess it's very hard as a researcher to try to not project your human kind of behavior to the animals, because you think, oh, they think like that, or they think like other way, but at the end these are animals and they cannot tell us like what they think or how or why, etc. And it's maybe this is quite challenging. You have written a very interesting paper. I wrote down here, and I want to ask you to try to explain to us what are social agent identity cells.
All right. Yes. Well, thank you for the kind comment. So the idea behind this mouthful, social agent identity cells, let me just kind of break it down. So these are neurons that we record from the medial prefrontal cortex, which is just in the kind of front part of the prefrontal lobule in mid part. These are neurons that are selective to when a specific social agent, so in this case an agent is somebody that makes an action in the world, they have a certain action and results in a certain outcome. So I was describing a little bit earlier what these neurons look like. So it would be neurons that respond not only to a specific other person or other monkey in this case, but to what that monkey is doing. So it would respond to, for example, you giving me juice, but it would not respond to when somebody else gives me a little piece of apple or juice. It would be like specific to an individual, and that's why we call them identity cells. And agency, because there's a certain action in the world. So that was a little bit the idea, that we have this representation in the brain that helps us to extract what others are doing and how those specific others affect the world. And that having that representation really helps you to guide how you make decisions, how you are strategizing. Is this somebody that's nice to me, or is this somebody that's not nice to me? And it's a little bit more. It really helps you to guide your behavior, and particularly your strategic behavior. So behavior that depends on what the other ones are doing.
That is very fascinating. When you talk about all of these specific neurons, in our everyday life, we are doing so many things, and we kind of do not consider that our brain constantly integrates so much information, and we maybe have like populations doing like encoding so teeny tiny details, and then at the end we have only the big picture. And it's so incredible when somebody like you, for example, pinpoint, this area with this kind of neurons, they're important for that. And if you have damage, maybe this kind of behavior is not going to be 100% normal. It's going to be some abnormality there or a defect. And it's truly, truly amazing. Was this the paper that you studied in humans? Or
so this paper we work with rhesus monkeys. So we train more. we train several rhesus monkeys to do this task. It's up here. So they basically sat around a round table just like this one, and they had to make a very simple hand movement that will result in apple piece for one of the other two. And they would just take turns to do this over several rounds. And that helps us to try to understand these dynamics. And then, like, during that time, I was also involved in this human study that was really a very unique opportunity.
Can you maybe describe it? The study.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah, I was gonna too. I'm going into it. So we had the opportunity to work in the neurosurgery department, and in the neurosurgery department, they offer this type of treatment for people with Parkinson's or essential tremor, that their treatment is not working. So they're taking medicine, and the medicine is not working. It's not stopping the dystonia or the tremor. So they go they got under this process of implanting a deep brain stimulation electrode. That what this does, it's a big piece of metal. It's not that big, sorry, but it's a piece of it's an electrode that goes into the brain and produces it stimulates the brain at a certain rhythm. That really, it's amazing. Like if you see it if you see the patients before and after, it's truly remarkable. Look it up on YouTube. And people, so people go have a surgery to do this, and during the surgery, you basically have the patient in the operating table, and they have to open the brain to place these electrodes in. So there's a very, very small time window where we can also record brain activity. So during this very brief time window, we present them with this series of, in this case, we presented them with a series of questions that are based on the Sally-Ann task that I was just trying to describe before. And the patients are awake. So they're like not fully awake, but they are awake, and they can respond to these questions. They were amazing. Like, you know, they were really, really good. Like, we had a really hard time with some of the questions in the lab, but people in the OR, they were really good. And so what these questions elicited is to elicit a theory of mind, like thinking about, is this what we call the false belief, that what the other one might be thinking is wrong, or what the other one is thinking is correct. And then we had some controls and whatnot. And what we found is that in Brodmann area 9, so it's also pretty much in the dorsomedial prefrontal cortex, that there are single neurons that represent this differentiation between what the other one is thinking and maybe what somebody else might be thinking, and what maybe traffic sign might be wrong, or also differentiating between false and true belief. Think like, what the other person might be thinking is wrong, or what the other person is actually correct. It's a true reflection of the current state of the world. So it has this very rich representation. It's amazing. Like you have such a relatively small brain area. It has this very rich representation that can really help you to make sense of what is driving the other people, which is in the end what theory of mind is about, is trying to predict what the other one is might be doing based on their current knowledge.
That is really amazing. So if I may recapitulate and describe, so there were like patients that were supposed to undergo brain surgery, and the school was open, and you could record from certain dorsal prefrontal cortex and just ask these people questions. So be in the room, and while they are responding, record from their brains, and then backtrack which cells are there, etc. This is, as you said, really unique experience, and it was done in the US, I assume, right? Yeah, because here it's hard to get to these things, I guess, but who knows, maybe in the future people will lower a little bit the regulations, and we never know. I wanted to ask you something about reputation and authority. Do we know what kind of role these two things play in decision making?
So reputation and authority. So reputation, it does play. I mean, like, both of them are super important during social interaction. So reputation is, we touched a little bit about that earlier, is history of interactions, and different agents will have a reputation for behaving in a certain way based on past experiences, and that reputation also affects how others react to them, right? So that has to depend. That has a very heavy memory component, of course, and has to be connected to decision making module. So thinking about authority, so you have been, in thinking about authority, I would say in animals, there's been this very how can I describe it, like a very strong interest in authority in terms of, and kind of the parallel would be hierarchy. So hierarchy, so most some species have a very hierarchical system. So for example, mice are quite hierarchical, male mice, and then most primates have some sort of hierarchy. And these hierarchies, for example, in rhesus are quite linear, as well as in rodents. And something that it's really interesting is that, so we had this study led by my friend William Lee, that he trained mice to compete for food. And so they started in they lived in this square arena, and they started in one of the walls, and they raced towards one corner to see who would get the piece of a pellet, like a little piece of sugar, basically. And what he found is that in between many other things, is that the more dominant animal would be the first one to reach, so the kind of the animal that had more authority over others. So in this case, we can think of authority as a proxy for who has the access to the resources. You can also think about authority in a different framework in terms of who is making the decision for the group. So there you have different dynamics, but I would just kind of emphasize one part, which is kind of you have to have a certain degree of conformity to live to kind of follow the decisions of an authority. So you can do this either because the authority really knows what they're talking about. So that could be a teacher that knows more about the specific topic, and you want to know more about that topic, or as it happens to me all the time, I'm lost in a new city, and I just see like, oh, this person is going with a very strong pace in one direction. I think that's the right exit, and I might be wrong. But you can also have this kind of conformity to the authority because everybody else is doing it, and you have, in this case, it's more about a social norm and not about learning more about the world. So you have these two types of conformity towards like a what could be an authority. And there's definitely we're trying to understand how this process occurs, both at the behavioral level and at the neural level. But yeah, it's fascinating.
That is even more challenging than the things that that we were discussed in the past. In our conversation. I mean, I want to ask you some question regarding differences, for example, in males and females, how they process information. I don't know if you've ever looked into this in for example, non-human primates, but do you see any kind of differences in any social interaction setup that you've described so far?
Yeah. I mean, that's a really important question. It's a question that I wish I could have more answers. So traditionally, work that is done with non-human primates involves very small number of animals. So we're talking 2, 3, 4 animals. So that doesn't allow us to tackle the question of sex differences, which is something that I ask myself all the time, like, oh, what would the differences be here? Especially for monkeys, like you know, they have different biology, and in the sense that they're driven by different things, right? You know, males and females. So yes, I would expect to see the differences, and but it's something I'm looking forward to address in future research, for sure.
It would be interesting to see to what extent do we have similar kind of biological, you know, functionality in terms of you know, difference in sexes that are conserved from the monkeys to the humans, you know. But as you said, this is in the current state is kind of impossible to address, just because you need to use a certain number of animals, which is around 3 to 4 in a good I think a year or years of research. I'm not that familiar with primate research, but I just know from, you know, interactions with people at DPZ that it's first of all very challenging to train the animal. It takes a year or something, and then you have a small number just because these are animals with high cognition, and you know, we don't want them to suffer, etc., etc. This is a different topic, an important topic about animal research, but I'm not gonna go there now because unfortunately we go toward the end of our discussion, and I just wanted to thank you once again for giving insights from your work. And actually I think we can meet in the future to go even deeper of what you're doing, because it's very, very interesting, and we just outlined now some of the things that you study. And yeah, thank you very much for coming to our podcast.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you, and yeah, thanks.